the singularity of God, the one master, and talks about the reaction of those who hear about the one master.
God is telling me when I do this way, it's creating a knowledge and an understanding. It's going to teach me a truth.
Amazing.
He's saying, don't try and make your path through me. God is one. Just take a straight path to him.
How interesting. Amazing. Goosebumps. Apparently, the heart sends more signals to the brain than the other way around. Okay. So there is a big control from the heart.
So if your heart's covered, it can't feed the rest of your body. It can't control it. It can't help it, to survive. So I think when that's removed, then it allows your moral compass to be corrected.
That's the easiest part of the journey. The rest of it, the learning, that's the difficult bit. But turning to God is the easiest part.
Well, welcome everybody to episode number 3 of this series of podcasts which we're doing called Unpicking Verses. And again, I'm here with my good brothers Ahmed, Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
And brother Mike.
Peace and blessings.
Peace and blessings to you as well.
Yes, Mike.
So here we are again. Firstly, thank you for people who have been watching on the YouTube channel. Thank you for all your encouragement and comments. We very much appreciate it. And we've noticed that we are getting some suggestions for verses that people would like us to unpick on this podcast, which is fantastic. So please do continue contributing with those ideas. And inshallah, we will be looking to unpick those verses which you're suggesting as well. So thanks again for everybody who is encouraging us to continue with this series of podcasts. So today we are unpicking 2 verses. We're looking at chapter 17, verses 45 and 46. And as you all know, one of the things which I learned the last time was how to share my screen, which I'm going to do again. So, right. So these are the 2 verses which we're unpicking. And one of the things, as you know, we're still at the beginning of this series of podcasts. And one of the things which Mike suggested the last time, which I think is a good way to start, is to actually read the verses. Which I thought was a very good suggestion. Yeah. So, I don't know, brother Mike, do you want to take us through it?
I love reading them.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go here. Give me just a minute. All right, 17:45, and I'll just read through 46 without calling out the number. And when you recite the Qur'an, we place between you and between those who do not believe in the hereafter a barrier hidden, and we have placed over their hearts coverings, lest they understand it, and in their ears deafness. And when you mention your Lord in the Qur'an alone, they turn on their backs in aversion.
It seems to me that these 2 verses are about the reaction of people who receive the message of the Qur'an. And it seems to be something about what happens to those individuals who are not prepared to ponder over or accept the revelations in the Qur'an. It talks about a barrier between people. It talks about the heart, which I would love to come on to a little bit later as well. It talks about not listening, deafness. It talks about the singularity of God, the one master, and talks about the reaction of those who hear about the one master. There's quite a few things here to unpick, aren't there?
I wanted to just add one thing in there is also, when first looking at this, I wanted to know why the word Qur'an is used so often and not Al-Kitab.
Interesting.
Because the translation is usually just made into the same thing to say the book is the Qur'an. Whereas I think in the Arabic, the difference is in the reading of it the right way. So Al-Qur'an will come from Al-Kitab by reading the book, the study. I think Qur'an is probably related to the study of the book rather than it be just a simple reading, because for a simple reading, the word tilawa is used, or it's just recited. So I think there's something significant there in these verses where the Qur'an is used.
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that actually, but it's a very good point. I mean, we know from the Quran itself that Allah says He does not use any words without meaning. I can't remember the reference of that particular verse. There is a reason why in certain places God will be using the word Al-Kitab, and in certain verses such as these ones, He's using the word Quran.
Or the reading, or the recitation. It seems to be when it uses the Quran as a whole, not just in concept of reading. That word, the way it's done, I think the reason why it doesn't say when you recite the reading, it says when you recite the Quran, because that word is more encompassing of the whole concept of reading, pondering, and attempting to learn from it and understand and apply it, not just the simple recitation. Otherwise, it would be and when you recite the kitab, because then you're just reciting what's in there. But when you use the concept of Al-Qur'an, I think it's being more specific as to the process and in the intent, what the purpose of doing that is.
Makes perfect sense. So when it says here, when you recite the Quran, God is referring to an event when you are actually explaining the Quran, the meanings, explaining the meanings of the Quran, go informing people about the message. So you're not just reciting it. You're not just saying Alif Lam Mim Zalikal Kitabu La Rayba Fi. You're not just reciting. You're actually explaining the meanings of the Quran, of that recitation.
Can I go a little deeper into this? If you don't mind, I've got something that might be a little more expounding.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, when you read the verse, it says, and when you recite the Quran, we place between you and between those who do not believe in the hereafter a barrier that's hidden. So it doesn't say when you recite the Quran to a certain people. It's not saying when you're reciting it to an audience. It's saying when you read this book and you read it in a medium tone, when you verbalize what it is you're reading, you as an individual are forced to read each word. When you're simply reading a book, your brain is programmed to automatically skip past all the simple words that it understands. And it's looking for the words that it doesn't, and will focus on those words when you're reading it. But when you recite, you have to literally read word for word. You can't skip anything. And when you do that, think about this when you do this next time, when you're reading in a medium tone, how you're doing it. Are you just trying to verbalize fast through it? And when you recite the Quran, we place between you and between. When you do that, your brain's not focusing on what you're saying. You're just trying to verbal through it until you find what you're looking for. But when you take the time and say, and when you recite the Quran, we place between you and between those who do not believe in the hereafter a barrier that's hidden. You hear my inflection? I'm trying to verbalize what I think this verse is literally trying to tell me in a way that gives it life, in a way that gives those words meaning. And I'm listening to myself do it, so at the same time I'm reflecting on what I'm saying as I'm saying it. It becomes more prominent and more understandable when you do it. And my thought about this verse when I first read it was, God is telling me when I do this way, it's creating a knowledge and an understanding It's going to teach me a truth that is a barrier between those who do not believe and those who do. For myself, a believer, it's a barrier between me and those who do not believe. Because I'm getting a truth, I'm getting an understanding, and I'm getting a life that's going to keep me safe and help me live a good way. And so that's what I get from that as a whole, just in simple.
I think that's a beautiful reflection. I hadn't seen it that way. And I think that makes perfect sense. In other words, saying that, so what we're doing now, for example, is what this suggests.
Yes.
So we are now, through this discussion, we are reciting the Quran. We're taking each of the words and we're thinking about what it means. And we're thinking about, as we will do later in this podcast, how we apply it to our lives. And I think what you're saying is this hidden barrier essentially is almost differentiating the outcomes that you will achieve compared to those who are not willing to listen or believe.
And a mental state too. I think it's a mental barrier as well to protect you from people telling you untruths, from people trying to teach you things that are wrong or bad or not true. All the truths are here. And that creates a protective barrier because you know the truths versus the falsehoods. And it protects you from falling into the misguidance of the falsehoods.
What I wanted to add to that depiction basically is the fact that you've connected most of the verse here, but what I wanted to add was it says, those who do not yu'minu bil-akhirah, so those who are not convinced or have a strong conviction of the outcome or the end, the last day. So it's saying that this unaccountability causes the barrier here. And I think when we're looking at the difference between qira'ah and tilawa, because I think that they can both be done of the book when it's talking about al-kitab. Tilawa, I think, is more closer to reciting. Qira'ah is closer to what we're doing when it comes to studying and reflecting upon. And the bit that actually takes work. So mental study, physical study, applying it to the physical life, going over it mentally and trying to see what I think. We're staying on 45 here, but if we take a little bit out of 46, it's the Qira'ah is basically trying to see what God is telling us in these verses. Okay? So when we're studying these verses, we're not saying, oh, what did this person in history say about this verse? And what was the reason for this verse to come down? We're looking, the verse is the evidence, so we check the evidence, and it's basically evidence of what God is saying to us. Not someone else is going to tell us why God is telling us that. We have to figure that out.
Right.
That's the study. That's the work.
Yep.
But I think the difference between just reciting and studying, I think that's where we get the difference, because we're turning to God.
You make a great example of that when you say if we tap into the next verse. Because the very next segment in that verse, it says, we have placed over their hearts covering, lest they understand it. And I think that's a big confirmation as to the understanding I'm getting from before that. Because they don't understand it, right? They don't get it. They're not willing to go beyond or go into it and do exactly what we're doing. So they have no understanding of what it's telling them.
So people who do not understand or believe or accept that there is accountability, that our deeds are counted in a finite state of time, or for a finite state of time. Those who do not believe that good deeds will lead to good outcomes, regardless of how difficult it is to undertake those deeds and to persevere. those people who believe that they can get away with undertaking bad or staying on the wrong path. So those individuals, essentially what we're saying here, that there is a barrier between us and them, those people who recite the Quran.
Can I add something there? Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to say this idea of yu'minu bil akhirati, how it's accountability, can also be for our understanding of what we're studying as well. So we're accountable for our level of understanding, how we're taking God's signs and God's book. So whether or not we attribute that understanding elsewhere, or we say, okay, I'm accountable to God for my understanding of the message from God. Okay, so it's not just deeds and doing good, but also when it comes to studying the book, we're accountable to study it properly.
To study the book. Yes, yes. Yeah, that's a very good angle, actually.
And that's the process that I think when it's saying Al-Qur'an, that's what it's encompassing. When it doesn't say Al-Kitab, it says Al-Qur'an. That's the encompassment, what I was trying to get to. It's what and how we do it, right?
Right. Yes. Yeah, no, that's great. That's really useful, actually. Do we want to move on to 46? Because I think the connections are very strong, and there's a lot of rich, very rich lessons in 46 as well.
Okay.
Sure. Okay. So we did touch on this with it starting again about this mentioned barrier in the previous verse. It kind of comes in again on this kind of narrative to say we've put on their hearts coverings. It's possible here that it's saying that they're not really aware. It's sort of ignorance. Because they're not convicted in their accountability in the hereafter, it puts this ignorance on them that they're not aware of.
Yeah, so that's the first thing I wanted to think of was what does it mean by their hearts? What's the definition of that? So I went to the root word just to throw that out there and give it some more clarification or definition. To turn, return. This is the root word, kaf, lam, ba. To turn, return, repentance and grief, turn a thing upside down, change direction, turn it about to its face and back, turn inside out, change a condition. And then qalb is heart. So it's the concept of changing a condition of your heart from non-belief to believing, or maybe that concept of acceptance. And at that point, when you turn from not believing to accepting Allah, regardless of the message or messenger, the whole concept's the same. When you believe in Him, that's when He takes the covering, the barricade off your heart, so that you're able to accept or start to receive. I just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, I agree. I've been thinking about the heart as well. Firstly, why the heart, and what is it about covering the heart? And I did a short piece on this in one of my videos, actually, when we were looking at the study of what does submission mean, and I was describing how I understand the reason for God mentioning the heart in this, and it went something like this. But obviously, interested to hear your thoughts on this. So, and before we get into this, one of the things that I've noticed in many translations is that a number of translators actually translate this word qulubihim as mind. That the mind is covered, so you're not able to think about something. I think that's what the translator is trying to accomplish with that translation. However, I think there is a reason why God has used the word heart and not mind when Allah uses the word heart. And that reason, I believe, from thinking and pondering about this, is that if you believe something, or if you find something logical through your mind, you can still transgress. Let me give you an example. When you're driving a car and you know that there is that the speed limit is monitored by the police, you have intellectual satisfaction that the police is monitoring your speed. That will not necessarily stop you from breaking the law and speeding, because you may still have a desire to go faster and to get to your destination quicker, despite knowing that it is wrong, that it is dangerous, that you could be punished for it if you are caught. So the mind itself, by itself, doesn't necessarily help you to attain that elevated status which Allah describes in the Quran of someone who has taqwa. The heart is where your desires are controlled. And what Allah is trying to get mankind to be and to do is to accept Allah's revelations through the heart, and for it to seep into the heart, so that our desires are consistent with the message, with the straight path, so that our desires are not conflicting with our mind. And that's why Allah, in my view, is talking about the heart. It is deliberate, because that is the center, the core of our desire. And this is about the desires and emotions which Allah is trying to train us to control and to get on the right path. And if you cover it, that means you're not allowing the message to seep into your heart. Even if it gets into your mind, it's not seeping into your heart. And so the submission of the heart, I think, is critical. And that is why I think Allah has used the word heart here deliberately. And when it is translated as the mind, it is an inaccurate translation.
I could put another metaphor to that as well. The heart is a metaphor to a point in your body, in your conscious, where your moral compass resides. Your moral compass is your ultimate control of the boundaries and how well you stay within it, because your moral compass includes your feelings, your emotion, your guilt, your all of that's in there. So your mind is only up here, and your heart is what feeds the rest of your entire body. Your heart feeds it. So if your heart's covered, it can't feed the rest of your body. It can't control it. It can't help it, to survive. So I think when that's removed, then it allows your moral compass to be corrected. And it allows you to, because you have to be willing to do that. It all comes down to you. That's your choice. The compass is there. You have to be willing to reside within the boundaries of it. And as long as you're not willing to accept or understand, that cover, that lock stays on your heart. You are not allowing yourself to receive or understand. It's that mind thing, right? You've heard a truth, but your mind's not willing to let it go. Not willing to go beyond that barrier. So the barrier on your moral compass still stays locked. It won't allow you to receive or let out. To feed the rest of your body and let it grow and start to feel and start to benefit. I couldn't think of the word.
It's gonna have to deal with the work of doing this qira'ah.
Yeah.
Of studying life to derive the truth from what's being given to us from God. So our life is our experience that we witness. Yeah. So everything that we are put witness to is a part of what has been sent down to us, what's been given to us. So I don't think qira'ah is always of Al-Qur'an. I think Al-Qur'an is when you're reading Al-Kitab, when you're studying Al-Kitab, that is where qira'ah of Al-Qur'an comes into play. But just qira'ah itself is just like studying. I think life is something that we should study. Every person should take into account and be accountable and really take their life into study to learn from. And when it says about them not believing in their akhirah or that accountability, the point of where they become accountable, I think it's talking about their heart, because I think it's this ignorance ends up stopping them or blocking their heart, so they don't have to do this qira'ah, and they can get through life without seeking actual truth. They're just going with, going
with the flow, being sheeple.
Yeah.
Just parroting along with what they see and feel. They don't want to go beyond that boundary.
Going with their mind and their desires and their whim.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think with that description of the qalb, which is the heart, I think that ties in with it being blocking from the mental to the actual moral heart, the feeling, and so that they're able to do things and justify doing things that aren't proven in truth. So, for example, to bring about something to say that I can do this and this is holy, or this is, and to bring about, to tell someone else to do something and say, oh, this will get you closer to God, because they're just using their brain. When it comes to their heart, there's no actual relation to what's actually going on. Their intentions are driving them.
Yeah. And it goes back to the very rules that God gives you. And what they hear, see, and do is all supposed to be challenged. It's supposed to be compared to the book and confirmed. They're not doing that. So they're stuck in their mind. They've got their heart closed off. They're not even willing to go that way. Because they chose to believe the rumors. They chose to believe what man's told them.
I think that's in chapter 41:22. I don't know if you can get it up, but that's a quote where I think it's talking about that your awareness and your sight and your hearing you're all accountable for it, and you can't hide it. God knows and is the seer of all things. I think that's a paraphrase.
Real quick, if you'd like.
Please, 41:22.
And not you recovering yourselves, least testify against you your hearing, and not your sight, and not your skin, but you assumed that Allah does not know much of what you do.
Yeah. And if I may add one further angle about the heart, which may be relevant to this. So recently I was doing some research about the heart, and I found out that relatively recently, so this is in 1991, apparently scientists discovered that the heart contains about 40,000 neurons. So, and it's called the little brain. And so there is a nervous system that's contained in the heart. And what they found, and this is obviously pretty early science at the moment, it shows how much more there is to discover about humans still. Apparently, the heart sends more signals to the brain than the other way around. Okay. So there is a big control from the heart into the brain, and then obviously the brain then controls, your body. And so again, it speaks to the heart being the core. So not only does it contain your moral compass, your desires, your emotions, but actually sends signals to the brain with its own nervous system, which scientists are calling the little brain.
Wow.
Which is quite an interesting scientific discovery. And, it's pretty early in the context of scientific discoveries. But I thought that's quite interesting. And perhaps when that science is further established, perhaps it will be even easier to understand why Allah has used the word heart and not the mind in places such as these.
I mean, think of the reality of the physical reality of it. Whenever somebody has emotion, where do they grab? Where do they go to? Oh, I feel that. It's their heart talking, right? It could be their physical heart, or it could be the mental thing, but you feel it in your chest, in your whatever emotions those well up. They well up from here, and they get to your brain, and then you explode. Whatever it be, sad or happy, etc. You feel it building up there, and then it comes out. So I can totally relate to that from a physical and a mental state.
So just bringing this up again.
We got to the heart on 46, and we kind of dove off there deep in a little bit.
So deafness.
The root word wa kaf ra says to be heavy, deaf, heaviness in the ear, be gentle, gracious, respected. Wal-Qur'an, majesty, honor, greatness, kindness, forbearing, dignity, respect. Wal-Qur'an, deafness, and tu-wak-giru. I'm not terrible at pronouncing. I'm so sorry, but you respect much. And wikran is burden. So there's your root word synonyms.
So what I would take from that, and if I think about, again, what it is about ears and deafness, we've been blessed with ears and the ability to hear, because when we are listening to something, that's the first part, or that happens pre-processing. So we need to be able to listen to the words of God before we can start to process and think about and ponder over it with our minds, with and implement before we implement in the form of actions. We need to listen. And I don't think this is necessarily talking literally about listening through the ears. It's about the willingness to receive a message. That could be through reading as well. So it's about receiving a message. When somebody is reciting it, it happens through the ears that we receive the message. When we are reading something, it actually comes through the eyes. But I think this is talking about the receptors of the message. And what Allah is saying is that these individuals who we are referring to, who have these coverings over their hearts, they're not able to receive the message. Their receptors are not working. Yeah. They're not able to process it.
Yeah, I just noticed something. Like, I remember there was a comment on our previous show about how if you look at the order backwards, then it kind of gives you another order. I think here in just this verse 46, where it says, so there's a cover on their heart and they don't understand and it affects their hearing. But if we go backwards, so if they're not listening, they're not going to understand, which is like they've got a cover on their heart.
It's like a way to test it and make sure it's correct in either direction.
Yeah, so you need to be listening properly and then understand, and that will then allow it to reach your heart, right, if it's the truth.
I could circle that back to the first verse as well with what I had said earlier. You're reading it aloud, you're listening to yourself.
Yeah.
So you've got your heart and you've got your ears as that, bringing it back to that for the individual as well as the group.
Yeah. But it also says it before where I just started. You could even go back a little bit ahead, but we've still not reached there. So we can still go backwards from further ahead we are, because there's still the word Al-Qur'an to come up.
I think that's really interesting. A form of connection, isn't it, between these two verses?
Yeah, it reminded me of that comment that got put on. It's literally like, because I was looking at it thinking, oh, we could do the same thing all the way through here. Yeah. And it becomes and it's interesting, isn't it, that the logic works both ways.
I mean, this is the blessing of God, and I think it shows, when we talk about this book being a revelation from God, and in it being no doubt, I think it's these types of rich patterns, if you like, or proofs. Let's say proofs. The proofs that are contained within the verses themselves, that if you really think about them, the only conclusion you can draw is that there is one master that has revealed this. At least for myself, when I see something like this, and I talk about goosebumps. I know I've mentioned that previously, that when you see this kind of proof within the verses, that leaves you in no doubt and makes you want to submit fully. I get goosebumps, and I get that when I see such proofs within the verses themselves, and that's just another one.
I think the Quran through the Kitab, I think Allah defines them as signs. When you recognize the signs or see the signs,
Right?
Yeah, that's the purpose of the qira'ah, yeah, so that it becomes clear what is from the Kitab.
Yeah.
So to just take the Kitab as a book that gives you, there you go, this is right and wrong, rather than a book that makes you think and you determine so much out of your own life with this guidance. It makes life an adventure to be able to study this like this. Whereas I feel if it was something that was, like an instruction manual, where it tells you, if you want this, press this, and the outcome is that. Whereas I find that this is encouraging us to take part in life and the study of life, as we mentioned before, and to seek it through this this backward way that is depicted here in backwards through verse 46, where it's like how you just mentioned now, the one creator, and then it's we're listening for what the message is. We think about it, and once it's the truth, it's allowed into our heart.
Yeah. It's also, you mentioned it's an adventure. Mm-hmm. What it also tells me is that it encourages discovery. So, because of the way, how mankind has obtained knowledge over, the many, many centuries of existence that we've now had, Mike has been able to share, for example, what it really means to have a barrier, for example. He's described that really well, and what it means about the moral compass in the heart. And, I mentioned, for example, this quite recent science about the discovery about neurons in the heart. If you take it slightly further back in time, what these verses should do, in fact, even now, they should encourage adventure and discovery. So it should encourage discovery of, what is this barrier? What is this? What happens from a psychological perspective that is being referred to as a barrier here? Why the heart? What's a covering? And I think, again, as you mentioned, this should be, the Qur'an, the recitation of the Qur'an, the qira, it should be an adventure. It's a discovery as well, isn't it? Through your lives, through our own lives, but also the journey of mankind.
Right. I'd say the biggest obstacle for those who are trying to do that, or may consider that, is, I've said this before, is their mindset approaching the book. How is their mindset? Are they there to discover and learn and explore and try to find the truth? Or is their mindset trying to prove something that's been derived from outside of the book and claimed to be, a truth? When you go with a negative mindset, you're going to come out with a negative outcome. I've seen it hundreds of times. And so it's important that, and it's explained in other verses, it's stuff we can explore later, but it is important that you prepare yourself mentally to do that. You've got to clear your mind. You've got to avoid as much intoxication of any kind of mental or physical thing that will skew your ability to think clearly and think openly and be willing to go beyond just what the words say at face value. It seems when you approach it that way, people come out with much better, much more fulfilling knowledge and understanding from it.
Yeah, it's like juicing a fruit like an orange.
Yeah.
Like you put the work in to get the nice sweet juice. Yeah. But the juice tastes nicer when it's super fresh and it's just been squeezed. Whereas if you take it as oh, this is an old book and there's no point studying it, we'll just read other people's books on it, then I think it takes away from the flavor of the juice when it's like it's not freshly squeezed. You've got to squeeze that stuff yourself and study it. Yeah. And I wanted to relate that to this actual studying. I think it's 2 verses out of chapter 27. The first one is verse 6, and the next one is 92. It's chapter 27, verse 6.
Oh, I apologize. Okay. Just
And
verse 6.
Verse 6, and after it'll be 92, because it's using similar connotation around the word qira'ah, I think, here.
All right. And indeed, you surely receive the Quran from near the All-Wise, the All-Knower. Is it 92?
Right. So just number 6, let's just review what's been said there, because it's saying that the Qur'an isn't received in Al-Kitab, it's from the Almighty All-Wise. So in order for me to be able to do a proper study of the book, I have to accept the signs from God. And it's God that's going to guide me, because I think it's also in verse 121 of chapter 2 where it says the guidance is God's guidance. Any guidance is God's guidance. God is the one who guides.
Okay.
But if we go to 2792, I think this depicts more of the idea of having to study, and my study of the verse is not gonna, you're not accountable for what I say about this verse.
Right.
So if I tell you something wrong about this verse now, that even now as I'm describing this verse, you're not accountable. You have to check this verse and go to God for the study.
That's right.
Because in verse 6, it just said God is going to teach you what's in this book.
That's right.
Yeah. So if we go to 2792, I'll let you read that.
And that I recite the Quran, and whoever accepts guidance, then only he accepts guidance for himself. And whoever goes astray, then say, only I am of the warners.
Right. So I'm just trying to make it clear to you. If I've said something wrong, then I apologize. Even now, today, describing this verse, I might have got something wrong. Don't just take it at face value. Check the verse and take it from God, what he's guiding you through his ayat. That's God's ayat, not mine. I can't. That's just what I'm receiving.
I can touch on that and make another point, too, that I often get challenged with from folks who follow outside the book. The accusation that I typically get is, how can you understand the Quran without Hadith and Sunnah? If you just study the Quran alone, you're just going to believe willy-nilly. You're just going to understand willy-nilly. And it's quite, in my understanding, after opening my heart and starting to see and receive this education and this knowledge from God, it's actually just the opposite. I'm actually starting to get the message and the truth. What they don't like, what they don't, maybe they don't like, because I don't want to make this sound like it's an attack. I think it's just that they don't understand, is that every person as you stated, is independently responsible for their understanding. And they're challenged. Again, their belief in the way they practice is completely challenged, because to accept that means that everybody will be at different levels of understanding. It's not that they're willy-nilly. It's just wherever their level of understanding is, their level of knowledge, how much they've gained, how much time they put into it, and how much they, do the process of the Al-Qur'an and try to learn and get their guidance from God. I get challenged with those questions like that, as if it's just unacceptable. There's no way anybody can learn just reading this book alone. Yet here we are looking at verses where God's clearly defining that is the only way. How does that get so misconstrued? How does that ideology become so far-fetched from the truth? It's mind-blowing.
Yeah, I think that's compounded in 17, 13 to 15 also. If you don't mind going over those three verses as well, that just compounds exactly what the Qur'an is saying here about having to study, because the word Qur'an is used here, or qira'ah.
Okay.
And the word kitab, which is book, or okay.
You want me to read them?
If you don't mind, please.
Not at all. And for every man we have fastened to him his fate in his neck, and we will bring forth for him on the day of resurrection a record which he will find wide open. Read your record. Sufficient is yourself today against you as an account. Whoever is guided, then only he is guided for his soul. And whoever goes astray, then only he goes astray against it, and not will bear one laden with burden, the burden of another. And not we are to punish until we have sent a messenger. And when we intend that we destroy a town, we order people, but they defiantly disobey their end. So it is proved true against it, the word, and we destroy it with destruction.
I wanted to bring some context here as to why I've picked these verses, because the translation itself has done it a bit of an injustice.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, so just to pick out exactly what the issues I'm having with this is that in 17:14 it says Iqra kitabaka, so it says read your book. So the word Iqra should be more along the lines of studying, not just to recite it. So this is something that is going to come with an understanding, not just the recitation.
I would have a little bit of conflict with that, because this is your record. This is not, this Kitaba it's mentioning is not the Quran.
Oh, sorry, yeah, I'm not saying it's the Quran, but it's using this idea of studying a book.
Right, but this isn't...
Rather than, it's not telling to read it or recite it.
Right.
That's what I'm saying to you about the difference. So it's saying that you're, in that 14 itself, it's saying read your account. This is just your account, yeah? But it's not saying account, it's saying book. So you need to, it's saying to understand it so that you can calculate your accounts. Because that's what it says at the end. Hisabaka. It means that there's some sort of calculation here. You're going to have to get your head around this.
Yeah. Well, there's your good and your bad, and these are how they're balanced out.
So it's not just to read it, as in to read it out loud or to recite it.
Right.
It's literally, you're going to study this because it's the same as studying life. You know, you have to figure things out in order to find the truth of things. And on to, did we go, you went to 16 as well, and it says, whenever we want to wipe out some town, the reasoning for why they've put town, I don't understand, because it's clearly qaryatan, which is a form of study. So it's not from my understanding, I don't see how qaryatan would then be a town. So I'm thinking that that the study of certain peoples or their understanding of certain texts gets destroyed and lost in time. So some truths get lost in time because we don't know. The study was lost. For example, I think it's the Greeks or the Romans who had a cement or a mortar that they put between the bricks, and we don't know that technology anymore. I think it's similar to that, how things get lost over time. So that art, that study for those builders, that's lost over time.
Right.
It's similar to how what's happened with the previous revelations. Those studies may have been lost over time.
Yeah. I mean, to put that in perspective, the root word kaf ra ya clearly says to entertain a guest. That which is a guest is entertained, to collect, run to, into, to explore, investigate with a much and diligent search. And then at the end says city and town. And what baffles me is how all the translations give all this explanation that makes more sense, yet every translation has been turned into city or town or township.
Yeah. Can I share one other verse which makes it clear that what we're required to do is to undertake our own deep study of the book? So this is chapter 3, verse 79.
Like me to read it?
Yes, please. You got there quicker than me again.
I've learned how to use this thing. Not as for a human that gives him Allah the book and the wisdom and the prophethood, that he says to the people, be worshippers of me from besides Allah, but would say, be worshippers of the Lord, because you have been teaching the book and because you have been studying.
So the word here, which Allah is using, is tadrusun. And tadrusun, the root letters are dal, ra, sin, which means deep study. So what Allah is saying is that the prophets, what they said to people was, don't worship me. You need to be servants of God, and you need to be spreading the knowledge of Al-Kitab by undertaking your own deep study of it. And this is what the prophets have been telling people. Serve God, spread the knowledge of Al-Kitab, and undertake a deep study of it yourselves.
And it doesn't specify just the prophet, right? In the beginning it says not is for a human, period, all mankind.
Yeah, I also think that this is specifying the role of the book.
Mm-hmm.
So it is to be studied.
Correct.
It is to be studied.
Yeah. So
this is
it's not
defining
just to be recited.
It's not to be recited. Exactly. Because you cannot spread the knowledge of the book unless you understand it.
You have to.
And what God is saying, study it, understand it, and then spread it.
Yeah. And if you're going to, one thing, the verse that I pulled up earlier about 2121, it talks about those who are reciting the correct recital. In the verse previous, it's talking about how guidance comes through knowledge from God alone. So taking on verses 120 and 121, you can see how...
Want me to read it?
Please, yeah. But you can see how the transition goes from them receiving guidance from God alone, and then it talks about reciting things in the correct recital.
Okay. 120. And never will be pleased with you the Jews and not the Christians until you follow their religion. Say, indeed the guidance of Allah is the guidance. And if you follow their desires after what has come to you of the knowledge, not for you from Allah any protector and not any helper. Those we have given them the book, recited as it has the right of its recitation. Those people believe in it, and whoever disbelieves in it, then those they are the losers.
Yeah, so they disbelieved because they didn't take on the studies and get the guidance.
Hmm.
So it's,
Yeah, and that can be the only meaning of this, because it's talking about believing in it. It is only by studying it, understanding it, can you demonstrate any kind of belief in something.
yeah, not just
Right.
by reading it and
Not just by reading
memorizing
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's almost a proof within itself, just by using those words, that God is saying that the true recitation of this book is that it is studied and understood.
My first reading of this book was my opening to my belief, to actually truly believing deeply. And that was the beginning of my journey through this. It's amazing how God will guide people when they have the right disposition. By means of that is people who carry themselves in a way that is already within the bounds that Allah teaches in the book will most often find this book very enlightening and very truthful.
Yeah.
Shall we go back to 1746?
Sure.
Here we go.
Right.
And when you mention your Lord in the Qur'an alone, they turn on their backs in aversion. This appears to be talking about the desire of many people, of the type of people that is being described in these two verses, of having more than one master, or having at least one master which is not God. And it is saying that those people are the people who you will find that will not be reciting the Qur'an, as in will not be studying the Qur'an. They will not understand it. They will not receive the message, so they'll be deaf. Right? They will not understand what is being said from the Qur'an, or what they are seeing in the Qur'an.
They don't
It
believe
will not get into the heart. They will not.
Between them and God. They need their intercessors.
Yes.
Yeah, I've heard this section of the verse being brought up a few times, and there's some differences of how this can be taken, apparently. وَإِذَا ذُكِرَ رَبَّكَ فِي الْقُرْآنِ وَحْدَهُ. So it says, your Lord in the Qur'an alone. So some may say it's talking about your Lord in the Qur'an, and it's only your Lord alone that they mention from the Qur'an. And some will say that you mention your Lord only from the Qur'an. So the Qur'an is the alone bit. Okay? So where my perspective goes is that it can probably work both ways to come out with the same meaning. Because it doesn't mention to read or to recite here. The
Right.
word is ذكر, إذا ذكرت. Okay? So that is like to remind or to keep in mind, to remind or to have in your mind. In my perspective, it's like if you're keeping in mind your Lord in the Qur'an alone, so you're only trying to figure out what is the intention that the message that your Lord is sending you this message. So it's more of a personal study. So it says in the Qur'an, so in the studying of the book alone.
Let's to expand on that more to say as you, the individual, on your own, going to the book and doing your study and etc.
Yeah, as in your technique of doing Al-Qur'an, of qira'ah, your technique of doing qira'ah is what you have in mind is God alone. You're not interested in what someone else has got to say about it. What has God got to say about this matter?
Relying on the Quran.
Yeah, and it also works in another way because it doesn't say Allah, it says Rabbaka.
Right.
So I think it does mention in other verses that people take on other arbab other than God. Yeah, so it does say the Lord in the translation, most of the translations. So I think other people can take other lords other than God. It doesn't make them God. It just puts them as maybe as a Lord. Yeah. So it doesn't say Al-Rab. So I think it works in another way there, where it can say that by studying the book properly and doing Al-Qur'an, so by achieving Al-Qur'an, it will expose your Lord. Yeah? So if Al-Qur'an exposes your Lord, you turn your back in aversion. Yeah? So if it exposes the Lord that you put between you and God, or even if you realize God alone through the reading of this book, then you turn your back in aversion.
Because you don't want that. You don't want to believe that. You don't want to accept that.
Yeah, because there's another verse that I can pull up that shows that people don't want God alone. And that is 40:12. Yeah, I think it's 40:12. If you don't mind again.
That is because when it was invoked Allah alone, you disbelieved. But if others were associated with him, you believed. So the judgment is with Allah, the Most High, the Most Great.
Yeah, so basically, if you're invoking Allah in your reading alone, some people aren't happy with that. They want you to invoke something else in your reading, like, for example, oh no, you need another book, you need this book, this will explain the Quran to you.
There's another angle to this, isn't there, which is, and if I think about the world today, there is a huge desire by many to mention other prophets alongside God and follow prophets' teachings. I mean, it would be no surprise for people to hear that, Prophet Muhammad is one of those prophets who we all hold in very high esteem, but many people hold him in such a high regard that they want to hear his name alongside God's.
Right. You see it in many mosques and that where they've got God's name, God here, the representation of God, and Muhammad right there next to him on the same plane, same level. Even though that's just a physical sign, it's still the same implication. You look at that, you see the two together. They're not staggered, but they're always together. And oh my goodness, I cannot say the first part of the Shahada anywhere amongst the mainstream Muslim without them finishing it if I don't say it. So, I submit to God alone, and then if I don't say, the part where they talk about Prophet Muhammad in that Shahada, or not that Shahada, then oh my gosh, I've committed a grave sin. They've had said nothing about how important it was the first part I mentioned, right? But they give all the emphasis on the second part to the human being versus the Almighty, the one who is our Creator.
It takes away from the respect, in my opinion, of these prophets and messengers, because I think the intentions of many people who don't quite understand these concepts that we're covering today, I think they probably just do it out of the fact that everyone else is doing it, and probably to hear something different is a bit shocking to their system. they want to give respect to this prophet messenger, yet they don't quite understand the role, because I think the narrative of the many has pushed this role up to something beyond what it actually was. I think if we take, like from our previous studies, a look at the role of the actual messengers, it seems very simple, but it's very prominent, because when, for example, we say the messenger, and it's just to deliver the message, that puts all the power in God and his message, not the messenger. The messenger delivers the message, and that's his role. And again, when we're talking about a prophet, as we described in the previous episodes, that their role is to bring good tidings and to warn people through the revelations in the book. So we understand they did that. But then to say, oh, there was more and there's other things that wasn't in the book that they explained and took it further, then we need to understand what the ramifications of giving up all that thought power to somebody else is. When we're told in the book that we're to study the book, then we have to have a relationship with it, basically, in my opinion. And I think this effort, so we read a few verses and we get something from it, it compels me to come and read again. But if I'm just reading it for the sake of getting through it, and I'm going to understand it elsewhere, I'm not going to actually practice what I'm reading, it seems to be like just a bit of a game that might be played where you're just reading it for points, like a computer game where you're just going through it all so that you can get to the end, and the end goal is the desire, the points at the end. Whereas I think with the way that the book is describing this idea of studying and going through the process of receiving guidance, I think this is more to do with not putting these prophets and messengers in such high places and saying, no, God is in the high place and my relationship is with God. And I respect them by accepting the book and by agreeing that there is, glad tidings and warnings.
Yeah. And I think this is also where I think, Ahmed, you were saying, if we read it backwards, the chain sort of all makes sense, doesn't it? You're turning your back.
Yeah.
You're finding it unacceptable to think about the Qur'an with one Lord in mind. You're not listening. You're not able to listen. So you're not receiving the message. You don't let it go into your heart, and therefore it doesn't control you. It's not seeping into your heart such that it should control your actions. And thereby there's a barrier that's created then between that type of individual and the other type of the individual who does study the Quran and understand it and they begin to apply it in their lives.
And how do they study it? By inversing the backwards journey that you just showed. So instead of turning their back, they turn towards the Quran and God alone. And then they listen. By studying, they absorb that knowledge, which then allows them to gain some understanding, opening up their heart to God, which then breaks down these barriers that they have, and they're able to understand things clearly, and their study is proper.
So may I offer another verse which actually does go the other way, which goes backwards from this. And in there's a very interesting message, actually, which we will see, I think. This is chapter 41. And it is the last part of verse 4 and then all of verse 5.
A giver of glad tidings and a warner, but turn away most of them, so they
Turn
do
away.
not hear. Yep.
Do
And
not
they
hear.
say, our hearts are in coverings from what you call us to it, and in our ears a deafness. And from between us and between you is a screen. So work, indeed, we are working.
So do you see how it's going the other way?
Mhm.
It starts by them turning away. So they turn their backs, right? Then they say we have deafness in our ears. Then they talk about how
Covering over their hearts.
covering over their hearts. And then again reiterates deafness in the ears. And then the barrier. So it's going the other way from, the order is reversed from 1745-46.
Right.
And it proves that, it's the proof of the proof.
Yeah.
In chapter 41, if we just go into verse 6,
Yes.
a slight bit, this kind of puts the nail in the coffin with this idea of putting the prophets and messengers in a high place. Because it says, go on.
Say, only I am a man like you. It is revealed to me that your God is God one. So take a straight path to him and ask his forgiveness, and woe to the polytheists.
Yeah, so
Amazing.
it's saying, don't try and make your path through me. God is one. Just take a straight path to him.
How interesting. Amazing. Goosebumps.
It gets more inclusive if you go to the next two verses. I would love to read those just for to bring it back around, because this goes back to our other two podcasts as well.
Yes.
Those who did not give zakah, and they in the hereafter, they are disbelievers. Indeed, those who believe and do righteous deeds, for them is a reward never ending. Right? So the believer,
Yes.
and in the path to doing righteous, or being righteous and doing righteous deeds, is the ultimate goal.
Incredible. It's all linked, isn't it? It's part of the pieces of that one big puzzle.
Yes.
As Mike, as you've been referring to in some of our previous conversations.
Yes.
One other thing which I noted in this, if I may just bring to the table, verse 5, which we read, it says, and so they say our hearts are veiled or covered, right? This suggests to me that such individuals, they are aware of this. So they are saying, they can only say if they are aware that they have a covering over their heart.
Yeah. And I think where it says here that what they're not aware of is the fact that it's their disbelief in their accountability of the last day that caused that. They're not aware that they don't feel accountable. The fact that they don't feel accountable for their understanding and their knowledge, that's what's causing this thing. And they're like, oh, but we have this. And they're unaware of the cause of it.
Right, yes.
I mean, that's a good example of the situation we're in with the mainstream again, right? They're taught to go to a different nomenclature altogether. How can you believe this? You're just believing willy-nilly. I've got this that tells me what that means, and I'm going to rely on this. And you're the one with the barrier on your heart, because you don't believe this other nomenclature. You don't accept this as truth. This creation of man over the creation of Allah.
What one might say, so what's the result of this? Why is this a problem if somebody has a covering over their heart and they cannot hear and they've got this barrier? What's the issue? And there were two verses which I came across which makes the result of this, the repercussions, very clear as well, which, if I may, Mike, if you wouldn't mind reading for us. So the first one is chapter 31, verse 7.
Okay.
The second one is chapter 18, verse 57.
And when are recited to him our verses, he turns away arrogantly as if not had heard them, as if in his ears is deafness. So give him tidings of a punishment painful. And then the next one is, and who is more wrong than he who is reminded of the verses of his Lord, but turns away from them, and forgets what have sent forth his hands? Indeed, we have placed over their hearts coverings, lest they understand it, and in their ears is deafness. And if you call them to the guidance, they never will be guided, then ever.
Yes. So these individuals, the result of this is that they will never be guided. And as we've discussed previously, I think it was episode number 1. I think it may have been episode number 1. We were discussing the guidance that purely, merely having, no, this was episode number 2. Merely having Al-Kitab does not mean you will be guided.
Right.
You have to have Iman. You have to have understood. You have to have pursued the truth and then implemented the truth. And when you get into that sort of state, then God can guide you. God will guide you. So what God is saying here in this verse is that those individuals will not be guided. And in the earlier verse, which you read, he spoke about a painful punishment for such individuals. That is the repercussion.
And in both cases, it doesn't say that's absolute, right? They still have a chance if they're willing.
From what you just said there, I think the difference between everything else that we have that can support us with our guidance, the fundamental there is turning to God alone. I think that is the source of guidance, as we mentioned in 2:121, where it says, Hudallahu huwal huda. I might be paraphrasing, but it's basically saying the guidance of God is the guidance. But there's no guidance if you haven't got the guidance of God. Everything else that helps to aid, like the book and the revelations and people narrating to what they're getting from the book, all that stuff doesn't count if you don't turn to God and accept guidance from God alone, which has given us life. So, we have the strongest connection is manifesting life through us, through every second of the day. So it's not as if we have to go through some sort of very difficult, that's the easiest part of the journey. The rest of it, the learning, that's the difficult bit. But turning to God is the easiest part. Yet fewest people start there.
Yes. You could say it's the key.
Yeah.
And that's why you have that ordering as well. You start with that. Because I think if you turn to God alone, if you have that utter belief that I must turn to God alone and that God will guide me, God will teach me, I think that sets you on your way.
Sets you on your way to absorbing and opening your ears.
Yeah.
And then coming to understanding by allowing things to be pondered upon and think on things. Because if you're taking it serious, like it's from God, you're really going to think on something and not just accept what you've been told. The narrative of Abraham was that he questioned and destroyed all the idols.
Well, first he started by, visually checking the signs around him, right? All the things that are going on. And he challenged what they're doing to see if they possibly had a way of being God. The sun in its motion, the moon in its motion, the stars in their motion, all the physical things around him that he could challenge, he challenged them to see if they met what he was opening up to understand. And when he recognized that these are on a set path, these are already God's, these are created, not the creator. And they're following their salah. They're doing what they're designed to do and programmed, the way they're programmed or built to be. And when he recognized that, then he knew, okay, my God is so much bigger and so much more encompassing than all of that I can see. Everything in my view night, day, stars, my conception, realizing these things are so much farther away, and these aren't things that are right there in my face that I can touch and feel. So the scope and recognizing the vastness of how big all of that is, and then recognizing that God is so much greater than all of that, that can instill, a very powerful emotion.
Yes, and I think that ties back into the first episode where we were talking about turning to the east and west. He was turning to different physical things, trying to figure out and learning.
And through that, he's established his boundaries, right?
And he's figured out, like, not this way, not that sun, not the moon.
Yeah, and I think that was the point, wasn't it? That the breaking of the idols is that, it could be that he was referring to the different people or different scholars of the time, or the leaders of the time that were saying, hey, we should go this way, we should go that way, our direction of life should be here, we should be doing this. And he broke all of them when he realized that there's one creator.
Right.
And that
in the physical form of that too, you got people worshiping, say, a clay figurine. Oh my God, that represents my God. I pray to that. I worship that. I expect return from that. But then he goes, oh, look, there's nothing. What did you get from it? Did I get struck down? Am I punished? Am I going to hell because I've destroyed your idol? The thing that's not God, that has no way to create, that has no way that doesn't have the abilities that God has to create all of this. Show me where your God has done anything like this. And so by having a means of comparison, he's expanded his knowledge and ability to understand that. And then he tried and was, went to them to show that the same understanding, to try and get through that barrier that they've created. They've been under that moniker of idol worship for a long time. It's not something that you can instantaneously change in somebody's mind.
Can we say that's like your description of the physical idol there is well represented? And if we were to say the word idol also includes the non-physical, which could be categorized as ideologies.
Oh yeah,
he's also destroying their ideologies as well, things that the people have set up.
I mean, there's so much in here as we've studied, but if we were to try and come up with some overarching views as to what the key messages are, then, I mean, I've taken that, which is turning towards God alone. I think the last, and I think we've spoken about it before, the last part of the verse often provides kind of the conclusive message in the Quran. And here, talking about people who turn their backs when there is a reference to God alone. And so for me, that seems to be the key here, as we were discussing. The key here is God alone. And it's more easily said than done, because most individuals will say, yeah, we believe in God alone. Of course we believe in God alone. But it requires some level of introspection to see, really, are we really turning to God alone? Or are we turning to, as Ahmed put it, are we turning to other ideologies? And if we truly are turning to God alone, then that journey towards the straight path and guidance has begun, because then we'll find that there is no covering over our heart. Our ears are open. We are listening. We are learning and receiving the message from the one God. And we truly begin to establish our iman, our true faith, rather than blind faith. And we're doing that through the form of studying the Quran. So the qira'at, the proper qira'at of the Al-Kitab, which is the Quran. And we see all of those things fitting together. If at the heart of it, we can truly establish that we are turning to God alone.
Yeah. And I think that is, like you mentioned before, that's the key to the beginning of this adventure. And I think this adventure is depicted in these two verses through the root word of qira'ah, which is also the same root word for Al-Qur'an. So if we see Al-Qur'an as the proper study of the book, and qira'ah is our life studies, then using the key through God to help us understand the barriers on our life and things that we must absorb through our sight and our hearing, to receive these properly and to allow them to go through the proper channels so that we receive the truth in our heart, is to pursue this adventure. And I feel that this should be not something, for example, like we mentioned last time, like we've looked at these two verses and we can then say, okay, wrap that up, we've learnt them too. But I don't think the whole idea of what this is conducive to that. We're not able to put it into that because it's a lifelong journey to study life. To have that relationship with God, it's like saying, oh, so the message of God, it's limited to our understanding. So we can only understand it to a certain point, and then we're not going to understand. The thing, what makes this such an adventure, is that we're always going to learn. So even if we brought these verses up again, we will still be able to derive something else. And which we've seen, we've spoken on verses in the past, and in the comments, we get the stuff that we didn't even notice. And so we could do a whole other podcast just on what's in the comments.
Yeah. It's amazing how amazing this book is, this kitab. Like you said, I think our understanding starts at a basic level. And every time as we grow in knowledge and understanding and guidance, we then see a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper, and we start to see how it is applied in different ways in even deeper understanding. I think the perfect example of how I came to it, the Quran or the Kitab, is my wife was told as she was becoming a Muslim in the normal sense, was told that because I'm not, that she would have to divorce me because I'm not a Muslim. It's not okay. Here's that outside stuff affecting my relationship, my life. So I threw my hands in the air and said, that sounds like nonsense. I've never heard that in any religion before. Let me see that book. Let me find that in your book. And that was my injection into this book. That was my introduction to this book. And I started reading it, and I read it, and I read it. I kept on reading it. My whole goal was looking for this truth that she'd been told. And when I got to the end of the book, I was thoroughly convinced that what she was told was a complete lie. It had nothing to do with this book. Why are they telling you that? I told my wife, I said, there's nowhere in this book that confirms what they're telling you. It's nonsense. In fact, it doesn't matter what faith you're under, what message you're under. The message has always been the same. But then I told her, you know what, though? After reading this book, I believe, and I call myself one who submits to God alone. And so you don't have to worry about it now by their standards. But by our standards, I then decided that, and I spoke with my wife about it deeply, and she agreed that it was time for us to stay away from the stuff they're telling her and to focus and learn what the book teaches you. Because once you learn the book, you can then protect yourself from the things that are not true, just like these verses we're talking about. I went to God alone. Right away, I recognized that was needed. And I went to God alone. We challenged everything we were told with God's words. And that is what has brought us to the place we're at today in our lives.
Well, that's a really interesting, real example, and one that affected you deeply. And I was going to reference that back to this, which is that when you heard of this, you didn't just, go to other people and say, well, is this really true? Is this not true? You turned towards God to find the truth. You said, no, I'm going to study what's in Al-Kitab, and I'm going to, give it its due worth of what it is, which is the Qur'an. It is Al-Qur'an. And you studied it and you looked for the truth.
Correct.
So you turned towards God. That was your first step.
Yep.
And then, the rest followed.
Yep.
You were willing to receive the message, you were willing to let yourself understand it and the logic of it, and you let it seep into your heart. Yeah. That's a really interesting, and if I may say, I'm sure that is not a unique scenario. Others will have gone through the same, and it is possible that many others would have listened to what people had to say rather than turn to God alone.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
I think from that story, it brought up something from my memory about when I first came across looking at the Qur'an in this way, because we're told so much about the messengers and prophets and how, we follow their way. Now, one thing after studying the Qur'an, I found was that the prophets seemed very keen in stopping people from just copying their forefathers. And it seemed like all of them were telling them, stop doing these things and stop, following your forefathers and just go to God alone. And here's the book for guidance. Yeah, we are given stories that are depicted from the narrative of the Qur'an to say that no, there was more to it, that they guided people.
Right.
As in, they took people and they took control of their guidance. When in the Qur'an it says, no, you won't guide who you want.
You're only in control of your own.
Yeah, and there's even a verse where it says, my people have taken the Qur'an as something far away, it's impossible, deserted, yeah.
25, 30, yeah.
25, 30. So it's not as if they deserted Al-Kitab. What they didn't want to do is study it, in my opinion. They just didn't want to take it seriously and let the revelation of the verses come to them through guidance of God.
Yeah.
Because the verses are brought down, but I think the revelation is done through understanding, and they are revealed to us from God by touching our hearts through our understanding.
It is our situation today. I mean, we have this, the prophet succeeded. We got this message.
We did.
They delivered.
Yeah, so when it says to believe in the prophets, it's like, how can you not believe in the prophets? We have the message.
We have the message. Absolutely.
We've been warned and we've been given glad tidings. So, of course.
Exactly. We've had that. And I think, so it's under our noses, and the majority of individuals, as Allah says in the Quran, the majority of individuals, unfortunately, do not seek the guidance from it. And I think one of the root causes of that is because they do not understand how important it is to turn to God alone. I think that has to be one of the root causes of this.
Well, I mean, that's the challenge, right? I mean, that's the challenge I would put to anybody who are following the guidance of man versus the guidance of God. In other words, people who rely on the Hadith and the Sunnah. Go to the book, and don't just read it in Arabic, recite it in Arabic. Actually study it, ponder it. Do what we're doing with these verses, and do it with an open mind. Don't try to find the things you've been programmed to believe are there. Challenge those things and see if they truly are there. If you can't find them, you have to come to some sort of understanding, or you have to grasp that you may have been misguided and that you may be on the wrong path. It's not the end of the world. It doesn't mean your life is over. Oh my God, all this time I've been doing wrong. Just like we showed in the verses, you always have a chance, an opportunity to come to God alone and seek his guidance and understanding. But you have to be willing to do so and go outside the box that you've been programmed to believe and follow.
Yeah, I think this issue of being afraid to make mistakes, I think that is a part of this barrier of not feeling like we're accountable for the last day. Now, it might sound counterintuitive here because you'd think that being aware of the last day, you'll be more afraid to make mistakes. Yeah, but I think it's the opposite, because if our goal is to learn and to find truth, we need to be willing to make as many mistakes as it takes in order for us to find the right way of doing things. We can't just be, have you heard of paralysis by analysis?
Yes.
Yeah, so if we just say, oh no, this is so complex, and if I go into this Qur'an, it's so complex, it's hard for me to understand, and it's easier if I just choose to be paralyzed and not use my logic and take someone else's thinking to explain to me what God is guiding me for. But if I'm willing to make mistakes, I'm willing to open my heart to God. I can say, God, you know you made me, and you have given me the understanding that I have now. So for me to better my understanding, I need to try and figure out what it says. So if I'm going to try and figure out and I say the wrong things, or I'm going down the wrong route for a bit, I know that's a part of my journey in order to be guided to the right way. But if I just stayed at the beginning point and said, no, I'm not going to make these mistakes, how am I ever going to get to the right way? Because I've not opened my heart up in order to. So if I know I'm accountable at the end, I know that God understands my mistakes. And that's why God says he's all forgiving, that he's merciful, and he knows what you do, and he knows what your intentions are. I think this is why we're always given reassurance. And the reason why we are told to seek out peace is not because we're not going to make mistakes and we're not going to sin and we're going to be perfect human beings and do everything the right way. No, the reason why we're going to be at peace, we need to seek peace, is because there are going to be times when our peace is challenged, and we're probably going to have reason to dislike ourselves. But disliking ourselves and disliking our life is like disrespecting creation and saying, "Oh no, I don't agree with the truth. I reject what's actually happening around me."
In denial.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think if we are ever to get, so in support of this, if we are to achieve intellectual satisfaction that about the truth, and obtain iman, true iman, not blind faith, but true iman with true intellectual satisfaction, part of that will come through mistakes. When we see the results of our mistakes, part of that will come through the results of the good things we do. And we see, oh yes, look, we can see how that now works. And look, God has given us lessons about this in the Al-Qur'an as well. And he has advised us of this and said, look, if we do this, this is going to happen. And we've seen it happen. That's part of the journey of obtaining true iman.
Even the concept that the prophet made mistakes several times and pointed
Indeed.
out is another reason to show that he's human, and we all do it. He's not perfect, even though he's receiving all this, the kitab, and he's tasked with giving good tidings and warnings about it. He's not perfect either, and it's okay to make mistakes. God shows that mercifully,
It's a really good point.
Yeah, I think
Really
that
good point.
the verses of the Quran can scare you to death, but also at the same time can rest you assured that as long as you're taking corrective action, that you don't need to worry about God, because He's going to be just anyway. Everything's going to be just. So it's not necessarily to say that, we owe God and we need to do this in order to please God. It's more so that I need to challenge myself and get through as much learning as I can in life and find as much truth and serve God for the way I've been created and be me, live my life. I think I even studied that in Surah Al-Kawthar, is it 107? Chapter 107, where it's telling you, go out, like God has created abundance. Go out and live your life. And, these things that are blocking you, that is your enemy. And something that's blocking you is your adversary.
It's not 107.
108.
108, yeah. But I just wanted to mention, as if, like, there's abundance out there for us to make mistakes and do correct things. And God is just. So even if we make mistakes, I don't think as if God is ready to punish us for every mistake. It's like, you've been tested. And you can feel it in your life when you're being tested. It's like, I've got a choice now. I did it wrong last time, but now I know. That's what I mean is the adventure.
Yeah.
Actually putting these things into practice and seeing myself become a better person, or at least noticing some change in my relationships and my appreciation of life.
My behavior, how I treat other people, all of it is, I've completely changed from the person. Well, I can't say completely. I mean, I think I had to meet those requirements for God to introduce the Quran to me in the first place. So I was already on the path. But because I had the basic, I was monotheist. I believed there was a creator, so that belief was there, but not under any religious moniker. I didn't follow it under any particular religion because I couldn't find any truths that all met my understanding, and I find too many contradictions in it. Right, so all of a sudden I get this book, and every contradiction I had an issue with was answered with truthfulness in a way that I could confirm it. And from that point on, I've grown substantially.
Yeah. I mean, this is what this book does. I mean, I've said many times openly to people that the journey of studying the Quran and studying life through the lens of the Quran is life-changing. I'm living in the same environment that I've always lived in, but over the last few years, as I've gone on this journey, and if people would have heard on my podcast, I call this a journey for myself as I'm learning the Quran. It's completely changed my life. From the perspective of how I look at things, how I look at people, how I think about people, how I feel about people, my fellow creations, how I feel about my fellow creations which are out there, which we call plants, things like that. It's completely changed the way I look at life. And when Allah says that you will see the light, it's enlightening. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
So we should start rounding this up before it gets emotional. I suffered or experienced goosebumps many times during this podcast. So really amazing. I'm really grateful because some of the things that both of you actually explained in some of the ways of looking at these two quite short verses is very enlightening. And the way I think we came up with some of the connections between these two verses, but also between these two verses and other verses in the Quran to try and establish that picture, that part of the puzzle. Mm-hmm. And one of the things which I've been noticing, and I'm sure you are as well, that as we are going through these verses, they're all connecting also with the verses we've unpicked in previous podcasts. You know, it's incredible how they're linking in.
It's like it's got its own philosophy that links everything together.
Yeah,
I've noticed that about the book as well. Like literally, you can open any verse and it'll bring up a topic out of its philosophy that just can keep you thinking all day.
Yeah, it's incredible, and that's why it's always so enjoyable diving into this ocean with you two, because we find so many pearls together.
So,
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a blessing.
It is. I become richer in knowledge and understanding, and I think also our connection with each other, our friendship we build with each other, and through this learning, it's become much stronger and much more fulfilling as a whole.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic, and I don't think we'll be short of ideas of further verses we want to unpick. If we ever do find ourselves thinking, which one should we do? I think we could just take the next verse. I mean, it's one of those where we can just take the next verse, and I think we will find these types of connections as we just did today. And as we mentioned right at the outset, it's great that we're getting some ideas from other people in the comment section as well, because I haven't looked up those verses that are being suggested, but I'd certainly be up for doing those, because I'm sure there'll be some connection between those and what we've been looking at, and we'll get some further angles and we'll get some further nuggets about, you know, what we're about and what we're meant to be doing in our lives.
Right, so if we go to chapter 96, verses 1 to 4.
All right. Read in the name of your Lord, the one who created. He created man from a clinging substance. Read, and your Lord is the most generous, the one who taught by the pen.
Taught man what he did not know. Sorry, you could add
what not he knew.
Yeah.
Nay, indeed, man surely transgresses.
What note I've got from that is that it says Iqra. Yeah, so take up study. Yeah, because it says that God is in control of teaching you what you don't know. So if you're going to learn something you don't know, you're going to have to turn to God to get that knowledge. Yeah? Whether it be God alone or you attribute that to something else, that's not mentioned here. It's not in the context. But what it is telling us is that God teaches us what we do not know. And how is it taught? Through, it says the qalam, which is like the pen, how it's written the book, where we receive the verses, and through study we get the revelation. So we can see how this ties into the study that we've just done to confirm about us. The qira'ah involves turning to God to receive knowledge.
Got it.
Yes. And I think that is supported by chapter 55, verses 1 and 2.
Yes.
When God says that I am the teacher.
Yes. And also chapter 7, 204.
And when is recited the Quran, then listen to it and pay attention so that you may receive mercy.
And when it's Qur'a, Al-Qur'an. So when it's studied, the study of the book. So studying the book is the Qur'an. Fastami'u, which is listen, absorb to it, and then you will receive mercy.
Yeah. And by the way, when it says here, listen in silence, fastami'u lahu, in silence, what that means is not, don't have any other sort of sounds around you. It means do not let any other ideologies or messages to disturb and corrupt and pollute that pure guidance which is coming from God alone.
Yeah,
that's the silence bit.
Yeah, mute your other ideologies.
Yeah. Indeed.
In order for you to get rahmah, for you to receive rahmah. So if we're going to worry about making mistakes, then I think this negates this idea of, if we're making mistakes while we're studying, it's fair enough to worry about going making mistakes just willy-nilly. You're probably going to make loads of mistakes out of ignorance. But if you're aware and you're conscious and you're making mistakes, to hear it saying that you will receive rahmah.
Yeah, exactly. I think the example I would give of the former scenario where you're making mistakes is in any godless society where decisions are made, things are made based on trial and error, or political aspirations and powers or ideologies or greed. So that's where, that's an example where you make mistakes, not as part of your journey of finding the true path defined by God, but because you're trying to find a journey that works around your own personal desires and greed. So when you make those, and I call that a godless society, and there are many godless societies in this world, that's the type of error which is not acceptable.
Just one thing to add. You've mentioned a few times I've talked about puzzles, and that derived from a thought that I had that I put into words, and I want to share that if it's okay.
Please.
So my thought was called the puzzle. We are challenged by God to question everything. Every question we ask is a key that opens a door to a piece of a puzzle. Just a piece. As each one gets answered, you fit the pieces together towards a bigger picture. As each new piece is added, the picture becomes clearer and clearer. The puzzle of life is a lifelong learning process. How much of your puzzle is complete? Peace.
Beautiful. That's a really nice way to put it.
And these little nuggets of knowledge that help us
come to that understanding, right?
This picture is never going to be complete. And that's basically what we were saying before. Like, God's knowledge is endless. That we're seeking knowledge from God as if, we're gonna get to a point where we know it.
Yeah, that's never going to happen.
No, it's an adventure, and it's a continuous discovery. The pieces of the puzzle keep revealing themselves.
Yeah. It's incredible way of talking about it. So we've talked about it. We talked about the Qur'an as a notion. We're talking about the messages of the Qur'an as a puzzle. And all of these can be unlimited. And all of them are rich. And they provide messages to us for our betterment. And when you talk about the puzzle, I think for me, my reaction to it is that, it's a puzzle where we will continue to find pieces. We may never complete the puzzle, but we will find some really interesting pictures in that puzzle as we start to get the pieces and put them together. And my other reaction is that it is so unfortunate that most people do not even know they need to find these puzzle pieces. And they're living their lives, having life is a blessing.
Yeah.
And so many people live their lives away without knowing that there are puzzle pieces out there, and that, the adventure is waiting for them to look for these pieces.
I don't know how many times I can mention that. Just in the hope, the slightest hope ever so that somebody takes that and attempts to start putting their pieces together.
What's motivated us to just continue doing it? I think at the beginning we didn't even know what we were doing. There's so much that we're receiving back from these little comments and stuff like that. it's like a reward for us. So thank you very much for the previous comments. And if you are able to comment on this, share your thoughts, please do. Yeah,
That's what we ask. Most importantly, share your thoughts, good or bad, negative or positive. We want to hear you because we want to understand as well. We want to know where you're coming from. And maybe we're wrong. Maybe you have something that's a better truth that we can see and verify and correct ourselves. So, all of it's welcome. We want to always improve and be better, break those barriers down so we can finish fulfilling our puzzle as much as possible.
Absolutely. And I think I speak for the three of us that we don't mind what comment we get. We're very open-minded. We're open-hearted. We love our fellow brothers and sisters. And so we love to hear from people.
Yeah.
We learn.
Yeah.
So
I love the comments section. I love going through comments. Even on all videos, I think we get... it improves our understanding. I mean, people say trolls, and people put some people are against these type of comments, where for me personally, they tickle me a lot of the times. I don't mind the fact that I disagree with somebody, and if it's something that might be offensive, for example, is my first reaction. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I grew up around people, we were making jokes of each other. My first reaction when I see something that shocks me or kind of puts me in my place is I laugh, and I try to see the funny side, because we are human and we sometimes think ourselves smart and stuff like that. When in reality, we've got to be able to laugh at ourselves and say, yeah, do you know what? I probably am wrong. I probably am a bit of an idiot sometimes. And it's okay. Thank God.
This guy.
Alhamdulillah. It's a blessing. And no, I just want to say also it's a blessing that that we have this team of Mike, Ahmed, with me as well, because just for me personally, because we're all on our personal journeys, this makes my journey so enriched. So I just want to say thank you to Mike and Ahmed as well from my heart. It's like I said, our journeys are finite in terms of time, and so I very much appreciate the time that you two are giving to helping me along my journey as well, if I take it from a very personal perspective. Mm-hmm. So thank you for that.
Thank you. It's an honor.
Thank you. Likewise, I think it's you that made this happen more than any of us. So, yeah.
Long may it continue, and inshallah, we'll be back next week.
Peace and blessings. We'll see you next time.
Peace and blessings. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.
أفلا يتدبرون القرآن